how much you needed a break until you are flying over nothing but blue. This wasn't just another trip. We had been looking forward to this for months. Everything was planned: flights, transfers, the stay, all booked through Costco Travel, which made it surprisingly effortless. From the moment we landed, our airport pickup was already waiting, and just like that, vacation mode began. And this was home for the next few days. The Wyndham Grand Cancun. The room was spacious, bright, and the best part, we hadn't even seen the view yet. When we stepped onto the balcony, that's when it hit us. The turquoise water, the endless horizon, the kind of view that makes you pause for a second just to take it in. And yes, it was all inclusive, which meant the drinks unlimited, the food included. The only decision we had to make was what to try first. The resort had everything: multiple pools, direct beach access, restaurants, bars, and space to do absolutely nothing. What we really appreciated was how easy everything felt. There was even an app where we could book the fine dining restaurants, check daily schedules, and see what events are happening around the property. And every night felt different. Some evenings had themed dinners, some had live music, some felt like quiet beach nights under the stars. It wasn't just a place to stay. It felt like a little world of its own. Of course, nature does its own thing too. Some seaweed had washed ashore during our visit, something Cancun experiences seasonally, but the staff were constantly working on it. As relaxing as the resort was, we didn't come all the way to Mexico just to stay in one place. Our first real adventure was stepping back in time, and then there it was, Chichén Itzá. Standing in front of El Castillo, you don't just see a pyramid, you feel its scale, its symmetry, its silence. Built centuries ago by the Maya civilization and is still commanding attention today. Every wall carried stories, every carving a message from a time we are still trying to understand. This was not just architecture, it was a city, a place of rituals, astronomy, and even sport. Some structures stood strong, some worn by time. But even in ruin, there's something powerful about what remains. Standing there under the same sun that once shined on an entire civilization, it makes you realize how small we are and how temporary, and yet how lucky we are to witness it. Outside the ancient stones, local vendors lined the pathways. Handmade crafts, souvenirs remind us that history and present day life exist side by side. It was the middle of the day, The sun was high and the humidity was heavy. After hours under the open sky at Chichén Itzá, the heat was starting to feel overwhelming. But the path ahead looked different. Shaded walkways, green surroundings, and the promise of cool water waiting below. At that moment, we weren't looking for adventure anymore. We were looking for relief. And then we saw it. Cenote Experience, hidden below the surface, framed by hanging vines, with water slowly falling from above. It felt untouched, almost sacred. The path leading down was carefully built, stones lining both sides, guiding the way toward the water below. It felt intentional, like every step was designed to slow you down. The atmosphere was quiet, almost sacred around Cenote Experience. The water was cold at first, the kind that makes you pause. But within seconds, it washed away the heat of the entire day. After the crowds, after the sun, this was our reset. Just floating, just breathing, just being present. Looking up from the cenote, surrounded by stone, walls, and green vines, it almost felt like being inside a hidden world. After the heat, after the crowd, after the noise, this was our quiet moment. And as if the day hadn't given us enough, our tour ended with a quick wine tasting, a small but memorable finish. Before heading back, we made one final stop, Valladolid, a town filled with color, charm, and a slower rhythm. Bright homes, quiet streets, afternoon light painting everything gold. In the Central Park, life felt simple. Families sitting on benches, conversations in the background, no rush, no agenda. And across the square, the church stood quietly, timeless, steady. Sometimes the most beautiful moments of travel aren't the famous landmarks, but the ordinary streets in between. On the second day, we visited Xcaret Park, one of the places that blends nature, wildlife, and culture. The first thing that welcomed us were flamingos, quietly standing, walking slowly, living in their own peaceful rhythm. There's something special about watching animals without fences or hurry. What makes Xcaret special is that it isn't just a theme park. It's an eco-archaeological park where nature, wildlife, and Mexican heritage come together. One of the most famous experiences here is the river swim. There are 3 river routes. 2 are open-air rivers and 1 is an underground river through cave-like passages. I was both excited and nervous. I don't know how to swim, but there are ropes along the river that you can hold while floating with the current. So I decided to try it. Tanuj is a better swimmer, but I'm not sure if he would have been able to rescue me if I drifted too far. Floating along the river was both thrilling and calming. Holding the rope, moving slowly with the water, surrounded by stone, walls, and nature. Some parts of the river were open to the sky, filled with soft natural light. Other parts went deeper inside stone passages. Markings and lights guided the path while crossing different sections. It was beautiful being surrounded by nature in such a quiet way. No crowds, no rush, just water, stone, and slow movement forward. The river experience wasn't about swimming, it was about trusting the current and enjoying the journey. Sometimes travel is less about what you do and more about how you feel while doing it. After the river experience, we started walking deeper into the park. The biggest realization about this place was how huge it was. It's almost impossible to cover everything in one visit. Every direction had something interesting to see. So we just followed the signs, reading the boards and walking toward whatever caught our attention. The sun was still strong and the heat stayed with us as we explored. Inside the park, we came across a colorful cemetery known as the Panteon Mexicano. It was created to reflect how death is viewed in Mexican culture. It's not as something to fear, but as continuation of remembrance and celebration. The bright colors, decorative designs, and peaceful surroundings are inspired by traditional Mexican beliefs about honoring loved ones. In many parts of Mexico, cemeteries are not only places of mourning, but also places where families remember, visit, and celebrate the lives of those who passed. It felt very different from the quiet, minimal cemeteries we are used to seeing. There were art in every corner, colors instead of darkness, silence but not sadness. Walking through it felt respectful and calm, almost like the place was telling a story without saying a word. What I loved was how every cemetery here had its own artistic concept. It was quiet, respectful, and strangely comforting. From the cemetery, we continued walking toward the butterfly pavilion. The pathway itself felt like part of the experience. Greenery surrounded us from every side, as if the park was slowly moving us into another world. It was hot outside, but the shaded passage made the walk comfortable. And then we reached the butterfly pavilion. The place was stunning, completely surrounded by greenery, quiet and alive at the same time. It felt like stepping inside a small, natural sanctuary. Inside the pavilion, there was a large waterfall, likely created as a part of the park's landscape design. The sound of flowing water filled the space. Staircases allowed visitors to go higher and look down from the top. At the top, there was a netted enclosure where butterflies flew freely. Butterflies were everywhere, moving slowly, resting on leaves and floating through the air. Standing there watching butterflies move around us, it felt peaceful in a way that's very hard to describe. Nature doesn't rush, it doesn't worry, it just exists beautifully. Another beautiful space inside the park was the bird habitat area. It was designed to let visitors walk among different species of birds in a natural-like environment. Parrots, tropical birds, and many other species moved freely across the space. The structure itself was impressive. Pathways, small bridges, and waterfalls blending into the landscape. In some areas, water flowed quietly beneath wooden or stone walkways. In other corners, birds were resting, flying, or calling to each other. It wasn't like a traditional zoo where animals are behind heavy barriers. The design tried to recreate a natural ecosystem where humans walk through the habitat rather than outside it. Every turn revealed something new. Sometimes a colorful parrot, sometimes a quiet path, and sometimes the sound of water. It felt less like watching animals and more like sharing a small space with nature. We spent time just walking, observing, and enjoying the atmosphere. Because sometimes travel isn't about ticking places off a list. Sometimes it's about slowing down enough to notice the life around you. After spending time with the birds, we continued walking through the park. We also saw the large turtle area, watching turtles move slowly in the water and fishes swimming beneath the surface. By this time, the heat and the long walking had started to catch up with us. We realized that walking more in the sun wasn't going to be enjoyable. So we decided to head back to the hotel simply because it was too hot for us to continue. We didn't try to push ourselves. There was still the night show that we wanted to see, but we knew we would save it for another visit. Sometimes travel is also about listening to what your body needs. The next day felt different. This time we did not book any activity in advance. We decided to explore on our own. Our plan was simple: visit Isla Mujeres. Until now, we had mostly followed tour schedules, but this day was just about us. We took public transit toward the ferry station. It felt more local, more relaxed, and honestly more exciting. After reaching the station, we bought the ferry tickets to go to Isla Mujeres. There was something fun about planning the journey ourselves. The ferry ride was beautiful. The water was incredibly clear with two shades of blue becoming very visible. The difference in watercolors felt almost unreal. It was one of those moments where you just keep looking outside the window without saying anything because the view was enough. There was something special about this day. We weren't following a guide, we were just two people traveling, deciding where to go next, and sometimes that freedom is the best part of a trip. We stopped by the beach to relax. We ordered drinks, enjoyed some food, and just let the day unfold slowly. No schedule, no rush, just island time. Before heading back, we explored the local market. Colorful storefronts lined the streets. Handmade crafts, souvenirs, bright textiles, and local artwork filled every corner. Markets like these are more than shopping spots. They reflect the personality of a place. You see the colors people choose, the art they create, the small businesses that keep this island alive. Over time, Isla Mujeres transformed from a quiet fishing village into a beloved destination. But walking through the market, you still feel that local charm. It doesn't feel rushed, it feels lived in. This day was not about ticking off attractions. It was about exploring freely, discovering slowly, and enjoying the simple rhythm of island life. On our way to Isla Mujeres, earlier that day we had noticed a flea market and we decided we had to come back. So that evening we stepped out again. The market was lively. Rows of small shops selling souvenirs, handmade items, colorful bags, jewelry, and little pieces of Mexico. I picked up a few gifts to take back home. It's always nice to carry something physical from a place you have experienced. We also wanted to experience a bit of Cancun's nightlife. The streets felt alive. Music in the background, lights everywhere, people enjoying their vacations. Cancun has this dual personality: calm beaches by day, vibrant energy by night. This trip gave us a little bit of everything: adventure, history, nature, freedom, and small moments in between. Markets, ferry rides, late dinners. Not every day was perfectly planned, but every day felt full. And maybe that's what travel really is. Not just places we visit, but moments we carry long after we leave.